Hey there, curious youngsters. Did you know that we consume hundreds of products daily without even realizing it? While some are clearly made, others have a curious process behind them. And even though many people don't stop to think about such a complex process behind the sauces they're eating or the adhesive tape they're using, other curious people, like Senior Curiosity, need the answer to everything. For this and much more, these are 7 things you consume daily and didn't know how they're made. Sriracha hot sauce. Depending on your country, you may be more or less used to consuming hot sauces. And if we focus on this hot sauce known as Sriracha, did you know how it's made? Sriracha, or fermented chili, is the name of a hot sauce that originated in Vietnam, specifically from a coastal area known as Sriracha. And even though it's produced all over the world, the brand We Found Food is the most well-known for having taken over the United States market. But let's start with the process. The first step for our hot sauce is found in the jalapeno plantations that are located throughout the countries. Once the hot peppers have been harvested, they will arrive at the factory where they will be washed, and they will go through a crusher that will turn them into a thick and spicy red sauce. Salt, vinegar, preservatives, sugar, and garlic powder are added to the mixture. After a few minutes of mixing, everything is ready and is poured into huge blue barrels, where it will be stored for enough time, since the jalapeno harvest only happens once a year. After this, the barrels are opened and a machine takes care of sucking up all the sauce to pour it into small but powerful bottles that will end up on our tables. Despite thousands of brands, Vans sneakers stand out as unique. And if we're looking for a modern sneaker that lets us walk or do activities related to skateboarding or just be fashionable, should we think about Vans? But did you know how their sneakers are made? First, it all starts with natural and synthetic rubber mixed and pressed with a lot of heat, which ends up giving us a rubber of the highest quality. Rubber molds in the shape of a foot are made and, like waffle batter, go into a machine that uses heat and pressure to turn the rubber into the sole of the sneaker. After this, the cut fabric part is placed in position to sew on its well-known and classic white stripes. The lace protectors are also put on, and then, finally, everything is assembled on a foot mold to go through an oven, where the heat finishes adjusting everything. Lastly, glue is applied to the bottom, it's attached to the sole, and rubber strips seal everything. Finally, everything is sent to an oven to fuse the materials together. All that's left is to pack them and distribute them around the world. Nice design. Vans. Chocolate mints. Mint and chocolate go very well together, so some people had the idea to put them together in a candy. And did you know how they're made? The first step to make these delicate candies is to heat a lot of sugar in a heated mixer and pour it into a container while it finishes getting a gelatinous consistency. The mixture is then moved to another mixer where mint flavor is incorporated. Once the caramel is ready, it's placed on a countertop where 2 robotic arms will knead the large mass. The caramel is then pressed onto plates to form a large sheet, which will finally be placed in a roll where it will start to take the shape of a cone. And in case you were wondering, so now comes the chocolate part. To achieve a mixture that can be placed inside the candies and maintain its consistency, dark chocolate will be mixed with shredded coconut oil, and sugar. After mixing the chocolate for a few minutes, the mixture is placed in the center of the candy cone that was formed earlier. At this moment, the candy is twisted and pressed, forming a long cable or snake of mint candy with an interior of matty chocolate. Finally, the candy is placed into molds to get the perfect shapes we know. And once they're dry and can't stick to the wrapper, they'll be wrapped in paper, placed inside a box, and that's it. They're shipped worldwide to ultimately reach our hands. Mattresses. Humans can survive a few days without food or water, but they certainly can't last long without sleep. For thousands of years, just to be able to rest and regain some energy, people would lie down on stones or wood just to get some sleep. But luckily nowadays, our backs don't have to suffer so much and we can sleep on comfortable mattresses. But did you know how they're made? The most common types of dementia vary, and they include the following: The first step to being able to sleep on something comfortable yet sturdy is found precisely in its structure. Beneath the rubber, foam, and fabric of these mattresses lies a large steel structure. Once huge rolls of wire arrive at the factory, they go through machines that, using electric shocks, heat them up enough to mold them and shape them into springs. Then, when there are enough, all the springs are fastened together with more and more wire, and then they move on to the next stage, the covering part. At this point, layers of rubber and foam are added to start making it comfortable. And finally, a layer of fabric is added onto which 2 different patterns are sewn with huge sewing machines. And although this is how most mattresses are made, there are also other types, those that don't have springs inside. These mattresses originate from natural rubber plants in the middle of a jungle. Once the rubber is collected, huge molds are filled to make a natural rubber mattress, which will be very comfortable and durable. Finally, it's covered with rubber, foam, and fabric, and that's it. Ready to sleep? I think I got sleepy. Adhesive tape. Every time we need to tie something or when something breaks and we have to fix it, we probably use adhesive tape. There are many types of tape, each suited for a specific purpose. From paper tapes to plastic tapes, all the way to packing tapes that even have fabric threads. So did you know how it's made? The first thing we need is a huge roll of plastic film that's made in another factory, simply by melting plastic. All this film might look like tape, but it would never stick to anything, so now we have to move on to the next step, to the adhesive part of our tape. Depending on the type, more or less powerful substances can be used, but most will be based on a paste made by mixing natural and synthetic rubber. The tape contains an ultraviolet protector to prevent adhesive drying and fading, an antioxidant, resin for stickiness, and color pigment for the classic brown hue. The paste will be pressed against the film, which will have the adhesive applied to one side as it passes through. As I said at the beginning, we have different types of tapes, including those that are more resistant and stronger. Before applying the adhesive, they place a fabric layer that forms an incredibly flexible and strong tape when fused with the adhesive. Once the tape is ready, it goes to dry and is placed on certain smaller rolls, which have a cardboard core inside. At this point, belts of very sharp blades cut the tape in the cardboard, and that's it. We have our adhesive tape. Cards, either with a Spanish deck or a French deck. We always have a game that can keep us entertained for hours, but did you know how cards are made? First of all, we have to go to the factory, where the whole process will begin. Once huge blocks of cellulose from trees have been received, the white pulp is placed in containers and mixed with thousands of liters of boiling water. Although this way we would only get paper. Since playing cards require more durability, additives like starch are included in their production. Then, the pulp is sprayed onto a conveyor belt where the water will be filtered out until we're left with just a huge sheet of hardened paper. After the paper dries, add 2 more pieces to prevent the card from being translucent and revealing the other side, with a dark glue that completely prevents anyone from knowing which card we're talking about. Next, the paper, already on huge rollers, moves to the subsequent stage, the printing press. In this place, an employee is in charge of creating a digital template, which has the entire deck of cards ready to be printed somewhere. The printers that are used are obviously huge machines, which have the feature of printing in different colors. Once the sheet of paper is placed in the first printer, black ink is applied to certain parts of each card and characters from the deck. Then the sheet goes through the other 3 printers that will apply cayenne, magenta, and yellow color in different places, through certain rubber molds that are soaked in ink. At this point, we still can't play with the cards since they're inside the sheet. So now we move on to the blade stage. A set of circular saws will cut the sheet, first into columns and then into the size of a card. Finally, just to give it a bit more quality and finishing, the assembled decks are placed in a die that, with a lot of sharpness and pressure, finishes cutting the edges of all 4 corners. Stay away from casinos, Timmy. Frozen pizzas. Even though this food isn't too complicated, It takes quite a bit of time to make a real pizza. But if you're one of those people who just want to eat something without wasting too much time, then maybe at some point in your life, you've had a frozen pizza from the supermarket. But did you know how they're made? Even though making a homemade pizza isn't that magical, the process behind frozen pizzas is actually really interesting. The first thing we need for the base of our pizza is to have a homogeneous dough. In a large mixer, flour, salt, sugar, yeast, water, and oil are combined and mixed for a few minutes. Also, it's very common to add cornmeal to give it more flavor. When the dough is ready, it is left to rest for half an hour so the yeast can work and the dough can ferment. After this, it is placed in a portioning machine that divides the dough into smaller sections, which will then travel to a sheeter that forms huge sheets of dough. Flour is added to prevent sticking, then a rolling pin evens out the surface. And then some spiked steel rollers make holes in the dough so that air bubbles don't form. Now another plastic roller with round molds cuts sections of the dough for the pizza base. At this point, these bases travel on a conveyor belt that will take them to be cooked in an oven. When these come out, they will start to receive the main ingredients. First, a large cascade of tomato will cover the entire surface of the pizza. Another cascade appears, this time with a Y-shaped arrangement of cheese. Depending on the pizza type, there might be another pepperoni cascade, or whatever you can think of. Finally, the pizza goes through a freezer for about 20 minutes at around minus 30 degrees Celsius. Then it's placed in a bag and finally in a box until it reaches our hands. Before I go, I want to send greetings to Ikebs, Durna, a big hello to Jason, and another greeting to Ivan Perez Escobar. Lastly, I greet Carlos Silva Gonzalez, Gustavo Eduardo Pantoja, and send a final greeting. Is the star Nahuel Molina going to take it?